Morning, people. It is Monday morning here at Fit Body Bootcamp, and this is Coach Heather, and I'm going to be doing the nutrition news this morning. Today we're going to talk about sodium, how much we need, where we're getting it from, how the body deals with it, and maybe when too much is too much. Sodium. Usually people refer to salt and sodium interchangeably, but that is not the right thing to do. Sodium is merely a component of salt, but it is not one and the same. Salt is actually sodium chloride, so two elements making that up there. Sodium is about 40%, and then the chloride is 60% of what is known as salt. So sodium, salt, not always the same thing. So when we are tracking, when we are monitoring, we do have to be mindful of the difference. So 1 teaspoon of salt, that would be about 500 milligrams, is going to give you about 2,300 milligrams of sodium in there, which happens to be roughly the recommended daily amount. So when you're thinking about a teaspoon of salt, that contains roughly the recommended amount of sodium for the day. So some of you may be a little shocked already with that number, thinking that, oh dear, I might be in trouble. But let's talk about why we're aiming for that number and what it does in terms of our body and how that helps. So nearly 95% of the salt that goes into our body is digested and absorbed into the GI tract. So that is where it is going to be absorbed mainly. How we came about getting into this, or why we need salt. It was discovered once we found it. We used it a lot for flavor, obviously, preservatives, and on the ice, obviously, to prevent those nice hip flexor extensions in the winter that we don't want on that ice. But we use it in a lot of different forms. But when we're talking about food, it is going to draw water out of food. So it is going to eliminate the moisture needed for bacteria to thrive. So that is going to help preserve our food. It makes... It's a practice that's gone back to about 2000 BC, is using salt to help preserve food. Why is it important? Why do we need it? If we don't get the minimum amount of salt, we could die, plain and simple. That being said, though, the bare minimum is a very small amount that we need. We do need to obtain the salt from our diet. However, a lack of sodium, a sodium deficiency, is very, very rare, just because there are multiple sources to get that sodium from. Once we consume sodium, the body also needs to regulate it. So if we do have an imbalance there, we are going to see some side effects, some health responses from our body to that imbalance. So sodium and chloride are the main ions found in fluids that are outside of the cells. So we're talking about blood plasma being included in those fluids that are found outside of the cell. When dissolved in fluids, sodium possesses a mild electrical charge, so making it an electrolyte. So when you hear, oh, I'm drinking electrolytes, my body's going to need some electrolytes, we're going to need some sodium, and it's going to contain that mild electrical charge known as an electrolyte. The difference between ion concentrations across cellular membranes creates a membrane potential, and this is necessary for nerve impulses. To transmit those nerve impulses, it's necessary for muscle contraction and for cardiac function. So we do need those electrolytes in our body. Sodium is also required for fluid regulation. We need it to transport nutrients throughout the body. We need it to help regulate our blood pressure. And it's also going to help with the expansion of blood volume that is accompanied by tissue growth. So lots of reasons why we need sodium. That is not the issue. It's the question of how much and too much that we usually have to deal with. So sodium in the modern diet. So some speculate that excess sodium has come from our industrialized Western diet, and that's going to account for a portion of the high blood pressure levels, strokes, and heart attacks. Despite this health risk, though, it's continually found in a lot of products that we eat, mainly because the food salt companies, they're dependent upon us consuming salt. So we're going to keep finding it in our products. The average North American now consumes about 3,400 milligrams of sodium per day. So experts recommend that 2,300 milligrams per day. So we're already looking at the average North American consuming above the recommended daily dose. And in fact, if you're in that high-risk group, you're looking at down towards 1,500 milligrams of sodium per day. And most North Americans are in that high-risk group that we do want to be getting down towards the 1,500 milligrams per day, even lower than that 2,300. I talked about being able to survive on minimal amounts. That minimal amount is about 500 milligrams per day. So very easy to get that minimum sodium requirement in a day. That is so rarely the issue. It's usually quite the opposite, that there is too much sodium in the diet. So an example of how easy it is to get those sodium levels up, I know it's a bad one, but Denny's, they have the meat lover scramble. So that's going to get you 2 eggs. You're going to get some bacon and ham, some sausage thrown in there. There's 2 strips of bacon, 2 sausage links, hash browns, and 2 pancakes. Maybe not what the average person would eat, but just as an example, that Denny's meat lover scramble, it is going to have 5,690 milligrams of sodium. I know you don't have your calculators out, so I will tell you that is 379% of the recommended daily intake, just at one meal. So the more processed our foods are, is usually where the sodium is coming from. It's not usually the salt shaker itself that is the culprit. It's the actual processed foods that we're consuming. So our body's reaction to sodium. When we consume excess sodium, blood pressure increases in an effort to rid the body of that excess sodium and fluid. The kidneys filter out sodium we don't need and re-excrete it in urine. So that's also going to make the kidneys work a little overtime. When our kidneys aren't functioning normally, we accumulate sodium and fluid. What does that mean? Swelling. So just a lot of undue stress on the body that we don't need if we're regulating those salt intake levels, or those sodium intake levels, sorry. And then we won't see the fluid and the swelling that we usually do that is accompanied by excess sodium intake. The effect of salt on the body. So if we consistently consume lots of salt-laden food or high sodium foods, blood pressure is going to stay elevated. This means that the heart and the vessels are working even harder. Extra pressure can weaken those vessels and can cause vessel injury, leading to atherosclerosis and kidney disease in the long run. So not only do we have to be mindful of that high sodium meal that we have sometimes, but also those sodium levels throughout the day and that continued elevated heart pressure, blood pressure. Reducing sodium intake to less than that 23,000, that 24,000 mark can decrease blood pressure by up to 8 points. So if we also can add lots of mineral-rich foods that are consumed as well, this can reduce our blood pressure by about 14 points. So for the average person, that might not be a big drop, a 14-point drop in blood pressure. But what that can do is take somebody from the risky category and then put them into the pretty good category. So if we can just monitor those sodium levels, add some mineral-rich plant sources in there as well, we're going to see a big change in that overall health as well for people that are in that high-risk category. When we consume more plants rich with potassium, sodium, it's going to be excreted via the urine, and that's going to increase. This may be the main reason behind a nutrient-rich diet regulating blood pressure. It's also going to help preserve bones and prevent kidney stones. And while we're talking about bone preservation, consuming excess sodium increases calcium loss in the urine. So a few different things to keep in mind there. Why it is so important to watch those sodium levels and how the body's going to react to those increased sodium levels that the body does not require. When we don't need it, we have to get rid of it, and that can be taxing. And then, yes, so the whole thing about these pretzels are making me thirsty. A small increase in those serum sodium levels are going to trigger thirst. So with an increased sodium intake, we're also going to need increase in water to help make those sodium concentrations within the body normal out. So that is why the body is getting thirsty, is because it is telling you, hey, I have a lot of sodium in here. We need to balance things out. Get me some water, get me some fluid so that we can equal out that concentration. Also, when we're talking about sodium, we get rid of it through sweat. So under normal North American circumstances, sweat for the average person accounts for about 58 milligrams of sodium loss each day. Also, talking about urine filtering sodium out, if you factor in those urine losses, we're talking about another 180 milligrams of sodium as well. If you sweat more than the typical person, you're going to lose a little bit more sodium as well. So the amount is going to depend on your diet, your hydration status, so how much water are we drinking, your heat, acclimatization, and also how active you are. So active individuals, they can lose about 800 milligrams or more sodium than the average person as well, depending on that sweat level. So in this case, replacing that sodium depletion is also necessary. So it just depends what we're doing, what our daily lives are entailing. So our diet, hydration status, how much water we've been taking in, what the heat is like, how much we're sweating, how much we need to replace. So without replacement, blood sodium levels can get lower. So what we're going to see in terms of lower sodium levels in the body, muscle cramps, some nausea, some confusion, disorientation. So common signs of dehydration. But when we're not hydrating as well, we're throwing those sodium levels off as well. So things just to keep in mind, especially as it gets to be summer. I know track season for little ones is coming up, soccer, things like that. So yes, we do need to be mindful of one hand of the amount of processed foods that we're intaking, but we also need to make sure that when we're eating these whole foods, these more plant-based diets, that we are getting sodium to replenish anything that we've been expending in excess that maybe we don't expend on a normal rate as well. So if you consume unprocessed whole foods, you won't get sodium levels anywhere near that danger zone, but you may want to actually look at replenishing and getting some sodium intake in your diet. So again, if you eat a diet based on unprocessed and whole foods, sprinkling a little bit of salt on there is not the end of the world. Lean and healthy can easily regulate salt increases, some slight increases in salt levels, and actually you may need that if you've been staying very physically active and your daily demands will require that, depending on that hydration level, diet that we just talked about, and what your workout levels are. If you guys have any questions about sodium, let me know. My weekly challenge, given that the recommended daily intake is roughly 2,300 milligrams of sodium, I am challenging you guys to track your sodium intake for the rest of the week. Have a look at your food labels, get a rough idea, check your portion size relative to that information on the back of your label, and just get a rough idea. It does not need to be down to the milligram, but you may surprise yourself at either how high or how low that sodium intake is for the day or the week. So at least for a couple of days, give it a try if you're curious, or at least flip over some of those foods that you're wondering, I wonder how much sodium is in there, just to make yourself more aware. That's the goal of these nutrition talks, is to not become experts in one specific area, but to just open the door, to talk about things, to get you curious, to get you interested, and get you looking into information, because there is a wealth of information out there. It's just a matter of finding ways we can communicate it and how we can incorporate it into our daily lives. So have a look at those food labels and get an idea of how much sodium is actually going into your body during the day. And then think to yourself, how much am I sweating today? How much water have I had? Things like this. And just making sure we're keeping those things in balance. If you guys have any questions, give us a call, write a comment, send me a message personally, and I can reply to that. The rest of the week here at boot camp, tomorrow is Flip Your Beaver Tail. So no costume required. Come on in, regular workout clothes, and we're going to have some fun with that. Wednesday is our redneck workout, so we're looking for some plaid and some denim. We're going to have some fun with that. Thursday, the 150 workout. Again, no dressing up, but do come prepared for a great 150 workout to help celebrate Canada's 150th. And then Friday is our Flashback Friday, and we are going to be wearing our red and white on Friday. Remember, guys, we are closed on Saturday, but we're going to have a whole lot of fun for the rest of the week. So make sure you're coming in to get your workout in with us. And if you're not a member of FBBC and you want to check things out, give us a call. It's 519-386-8112, or just pop on by and we'll get you oriented and let you have a know of what's going on here. All right, take care, guys. See you.